Hi, my name is Sergey and welcome to another episode of my podcast, Unapologetically Brown. If you're joining me for the first time, thank you very much. But if you have been listening to and watching my podcast, I hope you're enjoying it because I'm certainly enjoying this journey that I'm taking doing this podcast. So with the last episode we recorded, you got to see and hear from one of my friends, Neelam, who has become a very good family friend. And we covered a topic that sparks off much debate and conversation in many families and friends. It was the topic of marriages in our Indian communities and Indian culture. And we were talking to her and she spoke about her experiences as a young adult at the age of 17 getting married and having quite an unconventional marriage at that time where she had the freedom of finding her own partner. So it was a great insight talking to her. It was an emotional podcast. So if you haven't seen it or heard it, please do go and have a listen. So on today's show, I'm going to be introducing two familiar faces. My sisters, Geeta and Hojinder, are going to join us. And I thought it was best to bring them on because they're going to be looking at it from another angle. We're going to be speaking to them because they both had arranged marriages just as I did. So we're going to be looking at it from that point of view, from the point of view of growing up in a household which was very traditional. Our parents were still trying to continue to have those traditions, those cultures. And growing up, we always knew that there was that concept that we would sooner or later have an arranged marriage. They will help us find our partners or navigate the setup where they would be introducing us to our potential husbands. So without further ado, let's introduce Geeta and Hojinder. Hi guys.
Hi.
Thank you for joining me again.
Back again.
Yes, back again. So today I wanted to cover up a topic that I think is quite close to all our hearts. We were growing up, I'll start off with you, Geeta. You, as a young teenager, your friend was Neelam, who was on the podcast, the last podcast with us. And her setup was very different. Her parents were really liberal. They were open-minded and they gave them the freedoms of choosing their own partners, and she did. Whereas for us, it was quite different. For you, it was quite different. For Hojinder, it was different. For me, it was different. We always knew that that prospect wasn't going to be there. We were going to be introduced by our parents to a boy or boys, and they would help us in the decision making and find a good suitor. How did you feel being Neelam's friend at the time, seeing her get married, choosing her own partner, knowing that wasn't going to be your path?
I was happy for Neelam. It started off as just a girlfriend, boyfriend, didn't think it was going to get to marriage, but it did. Happy for her. I don't think at that time I felt I wanted to go down that path, or I would have liked to met someone. It didn't make me feel, I wish I could do that.
Okay.
No, it didn't.
Is that because you knew that wasn't going to be your path?
It might be, because I knew I didn't have that choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Okay.
Neelam's parents were much more relaxed and modern compared to the household we were born in. Yeah. So that option was never going to be there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Neelam was 17 and you turned 17, and the talk in the house, I remember there were whispers, potential suitors coming in, Rishte coming in, people were telling mum and dad of boys and their families who were looking for a girl for their son. So How did mum and dad approach it with you? I don't actually remember those conversations. So, because there are stories. We know the stories of boys coming to the house.
Oh, yeah. I was never approached. It's just what we heard. Them talking about in the kitchen or, they having their conversations. It was never approached to me that they were looking. It was time for me to get married. It's just what you heard, them talking on the phone or them talking between themselves.
Okay, so Geeta, let's talk about these potential suitors, potential husbands turning up to the house. I know mum and dad would prep you in terms of you'd get a new outfit. we'd get the finest china out, polish up all the best china. Preparations would start early in the morning with the food. Smorgasbord would get ordered, everything else would be, you know. And then, of course, you would have to get ready. And then, you know, it would happen. The boy and his family would turn up. That's exactly how it happened, didn't it? So what do you remember? Do you recall those? Because I recall a few.
There's one particular incident where my mussy in Scotland had said about a family in Scotland, and they never told me, but the family had just come from India and they were going to pop over to our house that evening before they went back to Scotland. So no one approached me that they're coming. I just heard on the telephone that they were coming. I was, and Mum bought smoothie and that, and I was told to wear a nice suit, and that's as far as I remember. I went in with the tray of tea. And
as you do,
and I didn't sit. I just went in there with the tray of tea. And when I looked at the boy, he was like asleep.
He fell asleep.
He'd fell asleep. Obviously, come back from India, jet lag, whatever. He was asleep, and that's all I remember. And then they went. But I remember after they'd gone, me saying to Mum, "No way am I going to Scotland. Don't even think about it."
Yeah.
And I was quite adamant, I am not going to Scotland.
Yeah.
And left it at that. And then she told Dad, and they didn't pursue it any further.
Yeah. I do remember that because we were just laughing so much that you'd come out and you said he was asleep.
He was asleep.
Yeah.
And then there was one boy in Birmingham, which Dad's Chacha was saying, and that was just a couple of months' time before Bob. And Mum and Dad went to Birmingham to see him, and that was a good rishta. And then again, I said, I'm not going to Birmingham.
Yeah.
I said, I'm not going to backward Birmingham. And Dad was quite upset because it was quite a good rishta, wealthy family.
Yeah.
And Dad's Chacha was sort of in the Bajul line. He was saying what a good family it was, and I said no.
So they went to see this potential boy,
and the guy was going to come to ours at the following week. But I said no, I'm not going to Birmingham.
So you didn't get to see him.
It didn't materialise, no.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So then we moved house, didn't we?
Then we moved to Sherborne.
We moved to Sherborne Avenue, and then there was still, obviously, you know, still had to find you a boy.
Yeah.
And then the rishtar came through.
No, what happened was Dad and Uncle Bilihar went to this VG food stores in Acton.
Yeah.
And then Dad saw the boys. There's a couple of boys, Bob and his brother and that. And then they were talking and they found out they were related to the Bandals, Mummy just Vidal. And then Dad came back and said, are those boys married and that? And Mummy said no. And then they started talking and then it sort of,
So there's always a middle person.
And then I had no... sort of Dad said, you can't say no now because it's around the corner.
Right.
Yeah.
So there was no excuse.
No excuse is local.
So there was a middle person. So they went, they saw him. There was a middle person, a mutual person who knew all the families, and, went to see him.
They liked him.
Yeah, they liked him.
And invited them around to Mum and Mummy's Bandell's house.
Yeah.
And I went there.
Yeah. So, and is this when... Because I remember, I think then they came to our house, didn't they?
No, first we went there.
You went there.
And then it's like I took the tea in and it was like a 2-minute job. I don't even think I saw him, maybe one glimpse. And after that we came home and then Dad was sitting by the phone for them to say yes or no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To say yes or no to you.
Yeah. Is it acceptable or is it, is it okay?
Oh, that's... Yeah.
Hold on, you went where?
To Bandell's.
Oh,
the Bandell's, Mum Mihuni's house.
So it was a mutual house you went to.
Yeah.
They were out.
Mum,
Uncle
Dad,
and Aunt.
me, yeah. Auntie and Uncle.
Yeah, and Auntie and Uncle.
Yeah.
Is that when we did a facial for you? And because, so part of the whole getting you ready to see these potential suitors was we had to make you look the best.
Yeah, so we had a facial.
So
my sister Lindy
you decided to have a facial, didn't you?
Lindy decided to do me
I'll
a
never
facial.
forget this.
And while she was doing the facial, I think she rubbed a bit of my skin
away.
So it was really bad.
Burnt.
So I had to burn my nose. And so then Bully had to come and stick a bit of foundation there and make it look
And she was always there, wasn't she? Bubby was always on the scene.
She
was still very close to her, and she
so
was
it was
there.
nerve-wracking.
So,
it was nerve-wracking going to someone else's house and everything.
Yeah.
And then
So
waiting for their phone call, And I wasn't asked if it was okay or not. I had no choice in the matter whatsoever.
And there was no conversation between you and Bob
Nothing.
at the time?
Nothing.
There was nothing. And it was just a case of seeing each other. So then the phone rang.
The mama phoned and said, oh yeah, they've phoned.
They've accepted.
And they said, yeah, everything's okay.
We're happy.
Because my father-in-law was like, no matter what happens, this rishta's going to go through.
Yeah.
Because he liked Dad. He heard so much about Dad. And it was like, Sidhuane, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
End of story. So I don't think even Bob had a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it had to be.
Yeah. So it was difficult on both sides.
It was difficult on both sides.
The
Difficult
pressure
for
was
him
on
and
from
difficult
both
for me.
parents. Yeah.
We had no choice.
Yeah. And then were you allowed, so once that had happened how did Mum and Dad break that news to you? Well, it's been agreed you're getting married to this.
Oh, they didn't.
didn't.
I just hear it. Like I said, you just heard things.
It's great fun.
Yeah, you just heard things.
And then did you speak to Bob and did you see him?
Then it was straight. They all came. Dad when he went to do the PR, and then they came over and did the PR, and then we had the registry marriage.
Yes, yeah, I remember that.
Registry marriage, and then after that was in March. Then we used to talk on the phone, and then got married in September.
Yeah, and that's how it was, wasn't it? That's just how it was.
Yeah,
and it was difficult.
Yeah.
It was
yeah.
strange.
Yeah.
How did you feel? How did you feel at the time? Do you remember how you felt at the time? You were very young.
I was young. I think it was the norm.
Yeah.
It was like my bua's daughters got married. My dai's daughter got married that summer, so I wasn't doing anything different. I was getting married, and in our family, girls did get married at 18, 19. It was exciting, buying new clothes, doing everything that I was hoping that I would be able to do after marriage that I wasn't able to do at Mum's and Dad's house.
Because of those
more
restrictions,
freedom, can wear makeup, can wear nail varnish, cut our hair, do all the, girls things that we weren't allowed to do.
But how did you feel knowing that you were going to go into this family? You were marrying someone who you barely spoke to.
I didn't even think about it. It didn't occur to me.
Yeah.
That, I was a little bit scared, but I just thought it's
the done thing.
You didn't really get a chance to think about it.
Yeah.
This is what it's going to be like, because I'd seen it happening around me.
Yeah.
I saw my younger boy got married to a stranger, and he just came from India, and next minute they're getting married. So I've seen these sort of things happening around me that I didn't really have a chance to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you were happy to get married?
I was happy.
I wanted to get married,
yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to get married. I was working, and the next step in my life was to get married.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And once the wedding had happened and everything, and did you see your life changing? You felt that now I'm married, my life is changing, I can do what I want to do. How did it change for you in terms of that step?
I had a bit more freedom.
Yeah.
Had I could wear what I like. I could wear makeup, and I could do all that. But I got married into another typical Punjabi family that were quite
traditional.
strict.
Yeah.
So I didn't get that much freedom that I was hoping for.
Yeah.
Be able to go to Christmas parties and that sort of thing. It was still hard. Yeah, still was hard.
Looking on it now, how do you feel about it? Looking on it now, if you were to say, let's take it out of the equation that they were our parents. If we were looking at it as an outsider looking into it, what would you judge? I mean, I know what I would think. I think, what are you doing?
I think it's our parents are hypocrites.
Yeah.
Because all our life we were told, don't talk to strangers, don't talk to boys, not talking to boys, and then they get you married to someone completely strange.
Stranger.
You've never met, you've never, been out to dinner with, not got to know each other, and then they just because you've done the ceremony and you got married, that's it, goodbye.
Yeah.
We don't know the background, we
Yeah.
don't know. And it's not just for the girls, it's the same for the boys as well.
Yeah.
It's same for the boys as well, because like I said, he didn't have a choice because his father was like doesn't matter. You like her or you don't like her, you're getting married to her. So
it's difficult, pressures
it's
on
difficult.
both sides.
It's difficult.
Harjinder, what do you, I mean, your experience, again, we all had arranged marriages and we quite often talk about it, don't we?
we
You know,
do.
we bring it up and it comes up, and I think we talk about it, we have laughs about it, sometimes we get emotional about it, we talk about it in conversation because we say our kids don't know how lucky they have it, you know, they don't have those pressures. How was it for you? I mean, your experience was similar and different at the same time. But I know you agree in terms of, you know, with Geeta, what she's just said, you know, we brought up not to talk to strangers and then all of a sudden we're marrying a stranger.
I think it's a lot easier to talk about it now. If you sort of wanted to talk about it 10, 15 years ago, or even probably longer than that, it would have been a lot difficult. But I think we can talk about it now.
Yeah.
And like you said, we can joke about it.
Yeah.
And I suppose a bit of that is because actually it's not been that bad.
Yeah, and it's for us.
You know,
it's
I think
turned out
I think
okay.
for us we've
Yeah.
been fortunate with our partners, and you know, things turned out well. But if you look back and think, well, actually, the whole experience at that time, and if you were to put an 18-year-old through that experience
Yeah.
now, it'd be quite traumatic, I suppose.
I don't think we do it.
And
We
I
couldn't
think
do it
you'd
for
be
our
quite
kids.
scarred by it. But I think for us, it was the norm.
Yeah.
And I think when you grow up with something that's the norm, then you don't really question it.
Yeah, no, that's...
So I think you don't question it because it's something that actually is going to happen. We're going to get married. I think we were always told we were going to get married. Or actually, like Geeta said, I don't actually think we were verbally told that.
Yeah.
I think we heard our parents talking about it a lot.
Yeah.
And we heard mum and dad talking about it a lot. We also heard mum and dad talking about their responsibilities. And I think having 5 daughters, they felt that was a responsibility. And actually that was what we were going to do. And, you know, for them, seeing us settled and have our own families was quite an
Was a big
important thing.
thing,
It was
yeah.
a big thing in those days. And I think every parent has, I mean, even us as parents now, we have that desire and
Yeah.
aspiration for our own children to be settled with someone, and to grow old with someone.
Yeah.
And that's probably the same as our parents. They just had a different way of doing it.
Yeah.
And I think my experience was probably very different because I think I always knew right from the age of 12 that I was probably going to marry Raj, because it was a running joke in the family for years and years.
Yeah.
Whereas you know, and I think we all know the story is that I think it was when you were born.
Yeah.
So both of our dads were very good friends.
Yeah.
And obviously had grown, had a really good relationship, and obviously Dad, you'd come along, and obviously Dad was probably a little bit disappointed
Yes,
that you
'cause I
weren't
was
a boy,
number 4,
and you were number 4 daughter,
Daughter.
and I think my father-in-law tried to console him and
Yeah.
said, "Why are you worried? Why are you upset? You know, I have 2 sons, and I will make sure that I will take one of your daughters. I
Yeah.
will for my son." So it was always a bit of a
Running joke. It
running
was.
joke, and actually, when the time came, the proposal came, and
Yeah.
obviously it was for me and Raj. But again, I was young. I was 18, and Raj was only 21.
Yeah, so young.
And actually we'd grown up with mum and dad now, but at that time auntie and uncle, because they would make regular visits to the house, would always come and see us, and actually were always very polite and very nice people. There was, and I think that's the other thing. I think we've got to remember our parents try to find what they thought was compatible partners, and for them that compatibility was obviously religion, caste at the time,
Yeah.
and also similar backgrounds.
Yeah.
And even, where the family originated from in Punjab was quite important as
Yeah.
well. So it was very different things.
Yeah.
And not your compatibility with the individual, but more about,
Yeah.
were the families compatible.
Yeah.
And obviously we grew up with mum and dad, and so they were seen as being compatible.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was a bit of a running joke, but actually, the running joke carried on, and we did get married. But,
Yeah.
yeah.
They kept their word.
They did keep their word.
yeah.
And actually, the children,
Yeah,
understood that. But I don't think it was easy. Like Geeta said, it wasn't easy for Raj. I know it wasn't easy. It wasn't that he didn't want to marry me in particular, but actually he felt he was too young to marry.
Yeah, he was
and
only
it was
21.
probably the same for me.
Yeah.
It was that, actually there's got to be more to life at that time. But I'd got a job, I was working, and I suppose the next step was, to get married.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was very different.
Yeah.
Very
it's
different.
just
When we look back at it now, though,
I think when you look back at it, to
it's-
talk about it,
yeah.
and it must sound really...
it
some
sounds
of this
alien to people,
and I'm
doesn't
sure
it?
your listeners, this will all sound really, really quite odd to them.
Yeah.
Gita mentioned, she felt freedom to go to a
Yeah.
Christmas party. Now, a listener might think, what is that
Yeah.
about? But actually, it's true. For us, doing little things were very difficult because, we weren't allowed to do those.
Like at Neelam's wedding.
Yes.
Neelam got married, my best friend.
Yes.
A lot of the girls from school have gone, but my mum had to go with me.
Yeah. No, I remember because I went and we
My
spoke about it on the
mum
podcast.
went
Yeah.
with me to the wedding, and
And she didn't want us to dance. Do you
she
remember?
didn't want us to dance because there was a really big crowd, and I was told, if you get up and dance, I'll
Yeah.
go home and tell your dad.
Yeah.
It was
They
really
were strict.
yeah.
They were
It
strict.
Strict
was
to another level.
And it was strict to you're right, if we look at it now, it was another level. But at that time, looking back, none of us in any way did or rebelled in a way that we
No, we
felt
didn't.
it wasn't... I think there was always challenging conversations. Some of those. You probably did more than what we
Yeah,
did
yeah.
because we felt... I think we're very different.
Yeah.
And so some of
I
us
even-
challenged and some
yeah.
of us didn't.
Yeah,
But also, so when me and Raj got engaged, and actually I was probably a bit more... Things had moved on a little bit.
Before you got engaged, they did come to the house.
Oh yes, I remember, and I wore the most. And I can never forget that because
The outfit.
I decided not to wear anything special because I wanted to make a point of looking probably not great.
Yeah.
And I remember I'd had this purple sort of suit, but
Yeah.
I had a cardigan that had been hand knitted.
I remember. I actually remember.
And it was a purple
them
cardigan
coming around.
and I was very interested on what was on the telly because if you remember, that was the time that
Salman Khan's first film had come out.
film
Yeah,
had been
we all
released,
wanted to watch
and we were
it.
so excited
Yeah,
because
yeah,
we wanted
yeah.
to watch this movie.
remember it.
And my mum and dad had called
Them
my
over.
potential husband over.
And his parents.
And his
His
parents
brother.
and his brother, and I was more interested in watching Salman Khan
Yeah,
on the telly, and so really couldn't
Yeah.
wait for me to do what I needed to,
Yeah.
and them to go.
Yeah.
And Raj, we laugh because he says, "I don't think you're really interested that day," and I wasn't, and it was so obvious. But that that was an
We were.
interesting afternoon.
That
wasn't
was
it? But-
funny. That was funny because
Yeah.
I do remember the Salman Khan
Yeah,
movie.
I
we
do,
were all
and actually,
trying
yeah.
to just wanted to watch this movie, and mum and dad and make these arrangements without again consulting
Without us, we
anyone,
were
never
or
asked.
telling anybody or anything. And I do remember it quite fondly because I obviously wasn't at the age of you
Yeah.
guys. There is a couple of years. I knew this was what was. I was heading for, but I didn't take it seriously. So I always found it quite funny. I would always find things to laugh at. I mean, Gita's facial just up to this day just makes me laugh so much. Your outfit makes me laugh. And I can remember seeing you sitting on one side of the sofa, Raj on the other side, and Mama Chigbal sitting in
Yes,
the middle,
exactly.
trying to tell you what marriage was all
Yes,
about.
he was trying to
and
facilitate this conversation.
Honestly,
Yes, he
and
did.
I can't help. And I walked in, and I can't help
And-
laughing because I was laughing at the
can't
time.
remember. I won't forget, but I think he asked Raj how much he earned, and asked. Obviously, at that time, Raj was working for British Telecom, and he had there was lots of conversations about what Raj was earning,
Yeah.
and actually things about and I think at the end of it, I do recall Mama Chiggle saying, "Well, what more would you want?
What more would you want?"
What more
Yeah,
would you
absolutely.
want?" And it was interesting, but you're right. There was this conversation that was being facilitated by our uncle, which was interesting. But
So you had them, and then I had
you had
Bilhar uncle and
you had
Auntie,
it,
auntie and uncle. So there's always a middle person
and
there.
it's interesting. And it is interesting because now looking back, you look at those couples and think they were facilitating.
But don't you feel, because we were the oldest, we had a burden on our shoulders because Dad used to say, "There's 5."
Yes.
After
Yeah,
we've
yeah.
got a long,
Yeah, yeah.
we've got a long queue.
You had to
wanna
set
get
the
every, yeah.
example.
I think that was setting
and-
an. I don't know if
set
it
an
was I don't
example.
know at that time. Did we think it was a burden though, because I think burden is. Did we
No,
think
they used to
it was a
make it-
responsibility? I think for me it was more. I'd never want to disappoint Dad.
Yeah.
So for me it wasn't about burden or responsibility. I was a bit of a
But
pleaser,
did you
set an
and I
example?
wanted to
Yeah,
always
set an
please.
example.
Set an example,
I didn't
and
want
you
to.
had that on your shoulders.
Yeah.
And
Because if
we
you
didn't want to
didn't
disappoint
I didn't want to
Dad.
disappoint them.
I think
Yeah.
if you hadn't done the right thing
Yeah.
and married the boys they'd chosen, then the others weren't going to.
Yeah.
So that was what.
But
you
it's
know,
interesting because Dad always said, well, if you don't want to, and I recall him saying to me, well, if you don't want to marry him, then you're welcome to find your own. But actually, we won't be there
support you
to
there.
support you. So that does leave a little bit of
Yeah. So do you actually ever remember them saying, "Do you want to marry this boy?"
No, because I don't think that was a question.
Yeah, that wasn't a question.
That wasn't a question, or that wasn't an option. Do you want to?
Yeah.
Or actually, saying that, maybe as I've just said, it was an option, but then the other option was, well, if you don't, then
You're on your own.
So you're right. I think it was there. But it was put in a way that actually,
Yeah.
if you don't do this, then
You're on
actually
your own.
You're on your own.
Yeah.
And I think Dad sort of didn't. It was more pressure was put on Mum to make sure that we didn't.
that we did do the right thing.
That
and-
we didn't,
Yeah.
because she always then had her own. Well, if you don't do what your dad is
Yeah,
saying,
she
then
was the
I'm
middle
going to-
person.
She was the middle person. I'm not sure that's the case now, but I think at the time she was very good in convincing us that's what was going to.
Yeah.
She would bear the brunt of it because Dad would have a go. He would say,
Yeah.
you've obviously not raised your girls, in the way that you should have because they're not listening to what we're saying. Which I think, but it was interesting. Yeah, now looking back, and I think we can look back and we can talk about it quite
comfortably and relaxed.
I
We
think many years ago we probably wouldn't have
No.
talked about it comfortably, but I think now it
because I think we see it as in they really did think they were doing the right
I
thing.
don't think they were doing it because they wanted us to be unhappy.
No,
they were
yeah.
doing it because they wanted us to be very happy.
And I think they really did think they were doing the right thing
yeah.
for
They
that
did.
time. In terms of Hudginder, you getting married to somebody they knew of.
Yeah.
They'd known them for many years. Their dads were best friends. The mums were good friends.
Compatibility, yeah.
They were coming to the house. They knew the ins and outs of this
Yeah,
family,
they did.
and they thought, well, what else? The boy's a good boy. He's got a job. He's done his education. What more does our daughter want? So I think I do now. It's taken me a while to get there, more than probably you guys.
Yeah.
I do believe that they did think they were doing the right thing for that time.
Absolutely. And I think if
not
you
that
ask Mum now,
you
she
agree-
would, and I'm
yes.
sure if Dad was,
Yeah.
I think if you ask Mum now, she wouldn't say it wasn't the
Yeah.
right thing. She would say it's the right thing.
Because
Yeah.
that's what was happening around them.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was what was happening around
It's not
them.
that I agree with it, that way
Yeah.
was right, but I can see where they
Yeah.
were coming from and what their reasoning behind it was. And we all had our own experiences as a result of it. So Hudginder, with you, I remember the wedding really clearly. You got
I think-
engaged. I think you did talk to Raj a
Yeah,
little
I think
bit, didn't you?
that's what I was saying.
So
it was
things
probably
moved on a little bit.
and actually, when me and Raj got engaged, and then we had the civil wedding, and after that, there was lots of conversations.
Yeah.
And actually, I was very excited by my wedding day to get married.
Yeah.
And by that time, we'd had the conversations, and I could sense, like Gita said, this. Oh my God, I'll be able to do lots of things.
Yeah.
Travel, do things,
That's right,
and
yeah.
and go out and see, do the things that actually I hadn't had a chance to do, while at Mum and Dad's because it wasn't the norm. So
Yeah.
I was quite also I was going into a much smaller family.
Yeah.
And that also in a way was, it
Quite
was
exciting.
quite exciting. So yeah, and I'd got to know Raj.
Yeah.
And I'd got to have conversations, and we'd got to talk to each other. We got to know each other.
Yeah.
Before the marriage. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So there was a sense of excitement of this possibly finding this new set of freedom. New freedom.
Yeah, and it was going
New
to be
freedoms.
different.
Yeah.
It was going to be different,
Yeah.
but it was, like you said, there'd be the opportunity to do things there.
Yeah.
So, but,
Yeah, my experience. My story is slightly different, but it. I at the time when I was quite fortunate. I had a few years on you guys.
Yeah.
I reached the age of 22. I become a dental hygienist. I'd found freedom myself, you know.
Yeah,
I was
you'd
able to,
experienced
I suppose I'd rebelled a bit, you know. I was the rebel, you know. I did want to go to concerts. I started enjoying my life. I started earning a decent salary. I went out and bought a lovely new car. And for me, my life was starting. So for them to say, no, now you're getting married was what? You know, I've just had this newfound freedom and you now want me to get married. So for me, marriage wasn't in the equation. I was, no, I'm not, you know, you can put any boy in front of me. I do not want to get married now. So that's my reasoning behind just saying no to them. But they didn't obviously understand that no. And I think for me, the big thing was who they were proposing for me to marry Harjinder, you know, because it was tough, you know, because firstly, it was so close, you know, we are sisters and Raj and Iqbal are brothers. So for them to suggest, why don't you marry Raj's younger brother? I was like, well, hold on a minute. I don't think so. There's more boys in the world and I don't think, you know. So for me, that was my reasoning behind saying no. And me saying no was just not happening. Dad wasn't accepting it. I think he stopped talking to me for 2 weeks, you know. Again, it was a case of, he's a nice boy. He's been to university. He's got a good job. What more do you want? You know, and that's, you know, and I didn't get to know Iqbal. I was only allowed to get to know him after we'd got engaged. And there was a lot of pressure on, and I felt, my main concern also was, how's this going to impact my relationship with my sister? What if things don't work out? Then it's going to impact that as well. So I was worried about that as well. And of course, I always wanted to give mum and dad a hard time. So I was going to say no, wasn't I? I was going to rebel and say no. But eventually we did get married. I did get to know Iqbal. We're 28 years into our marriage. And, you know, we've had our ups and downs, as all marriages have. But I can genuinely put my hand on my heart and say, it's okay, we're all right. We have a beautiful daughter. And at the time, I don't think I even 10 years ago, I couldn't say that to mum and dad. I was still so, you shouldn't have made us have an arranged marriage. I should have been allowed the freedom of finding my own partner. But it has worked out, you know, thank goodness. And it did work out. Whether or not I'd ever choose that pathway for anyone else or for my daughter or even my nieces and nephews, I don't think I would.
I don't think us saying would we choose it. I don't think we have I don't think it's there. It's not even an option. And whether we choose or not, actually our children are just it's not an option.
It's
for
not
them.
an option.
So
it's funny you say that, because when I speak to people and we talk about arranged marriages, the concept of an arranged marriage has changed so much.
Yeah, exactly.
The description is changed. It's making an introduction, isn't it?
And that's
you know,
it.
You know, giving a phone number or a contact.
I think an arranged marriage now, that word is probably quite outdated.
Yeah.
And it's not arranged marriage.
And even love marriage, you know, to say those terminologies, it's
those
so odd, isn't
you
it?
know, the arranged and love.
You can introduce someone.
You can introduce
you
someone.
know, and that's it.
You
can't even force anyone.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And even introductions now are very, you know, far and, you know, because people are
nervous about doing it.
People are nervous about that,
Yeah.
and also children are doing. You know, they're finding
Their
other.
own,
And there's other avenues for them to explore that and find. But I think it's those words have definitely outdated.
Yeah, but even those other avenues. I mean, I look on it now when I hear about the stories, the online. It's a scary world.
It is scary,
and I think, and I laugh, and I say, oh my God, maybe firstly our parents saw something in our husbands that maybe we weren't seeing at the time, and maybe they knew what was coming. Times were changing and things were going to change. I really think if I was a child in today's world, you know, growing up and having today, I don't think I could do this online thing and everything. You know, nobody's meeting people face to face. You know, Neelam brought up the conversation that she met her husband in Hammersmith Palais. Who does that nowadays? Nobody meets down at the disco or anything, you know?
But I think the concept of marriage has changed.
Yeah.
I think marriage isn't as, you know, the be all, and, you know, if you talk to people now, they don't think that the end goal, you know, is marriage. You know,
Yeah.
I think we had, well, no, you have to, because
Yes.
it's a part, you know, that's what you do.
That's the next step.
But
Yeah.
I don't think it is now. I don't
Wow.
think people think that, you know, marriage is everything,
Yeah.
because I don't think it is.
But
Yeah.
look at our own girls.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
our own,
Age, we
you
think,
know,
oh my God, you know, age is just a number.
Yeah.
They are not,
you know,
they're
Yeah.
independent, they've
Yes.
got careers,
Yeah.
they're doing well for themselves. And their
Yeah, but
answer is,
so-
if we don't get married, if we don't meet that Mr. Right, because they're not willing to compromise, it's fine.
Yeah.
They're okay with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think because they don't see it as, I think when we grew
Yeah.
up, our generation,
Yeah.
it was the next step.
Yeah.
What else is there? You know,
Yeah.
you get married, then you have a mortgage, you get a mortgage, you buy a house, you then have a family. You know, those were the natural progression steps, but kids now are doing it
Well,
differently.
they've got all the freedom
Yeah.
already. They're
Yeah.
travelling, they're buying their own
places,
houses,
yeah.
they're living
Yeah.
alone,
Yeah.
they're doing everything.
Yeah.
You know, we're not restricting where they can go and who they can
Yeah,
meet. They're
They're doing their own
independent.
thing. Yeah.
So they're not
Yeah.
where we couldn't leave the house without mum or dad with us.
With us, yeah, it's true.
You know, they always went with us.
Yeah.
There was no such thing slamming the front door and going to a restaurant
Yeah.
or going to get a takeaway. There was no such thing.
I did it a few times.
Yeah.
I think it did change.
Yeah.
It did change in that
It
age.
did change.
And you know,
Yeah.
and it did, because
But, yeah.
I think our parents had to change, and
But,
I
yeah.
always remember Mum saying,
Had to
if
modernise.
we don't change, then times will
Yeah.
leave us behind, and we will lose. And they knew there was a sense of losing
Yeah.
their children, if they don't change. And things did change a lot. You know, if we
They
look at the rest of our siblings and
Yeah.
how they found their partners, God,
yeah, very
of course,
different.
it's very different, and you know, and that's how it was.
Yeah.
And there's no, you
Yeah.
know, it's a very different time.
And I don't think any of us resent them for the fact that our youngest, you know, there is none of that. And I think, like you say, they had to move with the times. I mean, they started moving. I mean, I recall wanting to go to a concert, and I had bought tickets to go and see Prince. And I spent a small fortune on these tickets. And it was me and Narinda and Ranjit and then a friend of mine going. And I said to the girls, right, look, I've spent a fortune on these tickets, right? They were right, literally front row tickets. I'm going, I'll be in the car. I'm not listening to this, you know, because Dad was going on, Mum was, you're not leaving the house, you leave the house, we're going to lock the doors, all this was
Who
going
dropped
on.
you off? Did I not drop you
No,
off?
I went on my own. So I got in the car, we took Narinda's car, I got in the car and I said, I'll be waiting in the car. 10 minutes later, she comes out. Then 10 minutes later, Ranjit comes out. Dad said he's going to lock the doors. He's not going to let us back in. Oh, well, never mind. We enjoyed the concert. We had a great time. We saw Prince. Fantastic. We came home. The doors weren't locked. The next morning, and this really did wind me up. I was really angry. I came downstairs, got ready for work, came downstairs early in the morning. Dad's sitting there having his cup of tea. How was the concert? He says. I said, Dad, the concert was great, but thank you, you ruined our night. And the doors weren't locked. Why did you say that?
Yeah.
And didn't acknowledge it. Well, I'm glad you had a nice time. That was it. So I think they're fair with me, probably. I don't know about anyone else, but I think they were scared with me because I was finding these new freedoms. I was enjoying this, and I think it was different because you guys hadn't done that.
No.
And here I was coming along saying, I want to do this. I want to go to a Prince concert. They were scared that she's finding these new freedoms. Next minute, she'll be off with somebody, and that's it. You know,
no, absolutely.
and
No,
for them, that was a big thing,
was a worry
wasn't
for
it?
them.
It's a worry for
Yeah.
them.
But it's
What shame I was going to bring, or
Exactly.
you know.
But it's like we got married at 18, and then the youngest, Ranjit, 28.
28.
No,
Ranjit was
29. Sorry,
29. She was when she got married.
So
yes.
things had
Yeah.
changed.
Yeah.
You know,
She'd seen a few boys though.
we introduced,
Got introduced
her
to a few.
loads and loads of boys, and it just wasn't materializing.
Yeah.
It just wasn't. I think it just wasn't happening.
Yeah.
Some boys she didn't like. Some boys that weren't compatible. It just didn't
Yeah.
materialize.
Do you
Yeah.
think with mum and dad, because, you know, we'll talk about it quite openly, the girls, there's 5 of us, we all had arranged marriages. And then we've got the boys, the younger siblings. And I won't talk too much into detail about it, but they both met their own partners and they both had that freedom of meeting their own partners. And we've spoken about that. And, you know, Do you think it is a case of one set of rules for the girls and one set of rules for the boys, or was that just in our family? I mean, I see it across the board in quite a few families, Punjabi families, where they do have this.
I don't know, because I think if the boys were girls at that time, and the fact that mum and dad had moved on so
They
much,
changed, yeah.
and I do think even if Ranjit had found her own partner that they felt was compatible and met and had, you know, were able to tick off some of those boxes, religion, caste, whatever, I think they wouldn't
They'd be
have
happy
objected.
to, yeah.
I don't think they would have objected, because I think we had moved on
quite a bit.
so I don't know whether it was a girl boy thing. I just think it was the times.
Yeah.
I personally think it was the times.
I think that is
and
well.
I
There's
also
a lot of
think
changes.
it's the character of the child as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
think you guys were a lot more bolshy. You were able to stand up and hold your ground. And I think Ranjit would have done the same. I think there was an element of, you know, this is what I want and I'm going to do it, whether you like it or not. So I think... And I think mum and dad would have accepted that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's
Because it was a good
10
10. It was 10 years.
Yeah, it was 10 years.
between,
There's 10 years.
10
I mean,
years.
Narinda, she didn't want to get married because she wanted to do a PhD.
Yeah,
Oh,
and that
yeah.
was
So her was, I want to
Education,
study.
yeah.
Education was, you know, and she was lucky because her husband at that time said,
you do
you do your PhD after marriage. And she did do a PhD after marriage. And her only was saying, I don't want to get married, was purely because she wanted to study further.
She did.
She really wanted to study
So
further.
I don't know if I don't ever think it was a girl boy thing. I think the girl boy thing did exist in our family on other matters. But I think
but maybe not
if it'd come on this and the timings.
And I think had Bob or even Raj not mum and dad would have been quite happy to say, look, there is somebody here.
I think.
Why don't you have an introduction? Why don't you meet them? Gita, your son Ricky got married to Monica, and he'd known her for a while.
5 years they were dating.
Did you have conversations like, you know, with similar conversations, or was it just let's just see how, you know, how you go?
So
or
Ricky
would you
came home after his second date and said, Mum, I've met a lovely Punjabi Jat Sikh girl, you know, because he knew, he felt he was doing actually, do you know what, even if she wasn't, I don't think I would have said no if she was a different background.
Yeah.
But he had to tell me that because I think he thought it was really important to us.
But that's because it was important to you, because our parents had made it important to us.
Maybe it was, and he came back and told me, and they dated for 5 years, and then eventually they did, you know, they got married. But yeah, when I see it the way they've done it, I'm really happy for them. I think it's really sweet. You know, they got to know each other. They can't blame anybody. You know, they met themselves. So they can't say, you know, blame an aunt or an uncle or a mum or a dad that you introduced us. And I think it is nice.
Well, that's how it should be, shouldn't it?
Yeah,
that's
how
that's the norm, isn't it?
And
That's
they're
the
like,
normal thing.
they're really good friends. They you know, and I think it's really good. And I would say I'd like the same for Avni. To meet her own partner. You know, that is going to be a successful relationship. You know,
I think we now can see it differently. We've seen both sides. We can have those conversations openly with our children. I don't think our children or anyone of that generation will understand this concept. It is completely alien to them.
I think our parents at that time, it was a lot about the wider, you know, what people will say. You know, what
wider community.
You know, what will people say? And I think we've got to the point of, you know what, people are people will talk, and actually
they'll
to
move
us
on. They'll move on the next
and also
day.
they're not important to us. I mean, I always say, you know, people are people, but at the end of the day what's important is your children and their happiness. And I think you know that now I think we have come so far in understanding that, whereas unfortunately our parents were still in that mindset, because it was very important what the community thought of them. Whereas I think we've gone past that. I think, you know, ultimately, you know, people aren't going to be there in your bad times. It's you know, you've got to, you know, there's a it's bigger.
It's like Ranjit, she got to 28, 29, and Mum was having sleepless nights. That she's getting old. And, you know, I need to find her a boy, I need to get her married. Obviously, we had Dad that wasn't well. So it was really hard. It was a lot of pressure. She wanted her to get married while Dad was still around. And it was a really big thing for Mum. and she was sick with worry.
Yes,
But now with Avni,
yes,
you know, if anybody says to me, what
Yeah.
are you looking? Doesn't she want to get married? It's
Yeah.
like when she meets the right person.
yeah,
I'm not going to force her or,
yeah.
you know, put pressure on her because I think, oh my God, she's getting old. No, age is a
No.
number.
Yeah.
You know, if she meets the right partner, because I want to see her happy.
Yeah.
You know,
But I
You
think
know-
ultimately she is happy.
this is what she says. She says,
I
I'm
think-
happy, Mum.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying my life.
And I think that's what we have to remember, because our
Yeah.
parents were so solely focused on you cannot be happy until you're married.
Yeah.
But what they meant was we won't be happy until you're married.
I'd like her to settle down. I don't want her to be growing old by herself.
Yeah, and I
As a
think,
mother,
yeah.
I'd like
Yeah.
her to meet her Mr. Right.
Yeah.
You know, when the time,
Yeah.
you know, is
Yeah.
right for her. You know, I see Ricky and Monica, and it puts a smile on my face. You know,
Yeah.
they're happy, they good for
Yeah.
each other, and you know, they do things together, and then I think, I'd like to see Avni
Yeah,
with the
and
right
I
person.
think ultimately all parents do,
course they
you
do.
know, and ultimately that is what they want to see. But I think we have to remember that happiness is you have to be happy with with yourself and how you are. We have to, our thought process has to change, and it has. And you know, as we've got older, I think we have a lot, but it's also because what we've been taught, what we've been told, and I think that's a lot of it stems from that, you know.
But surprisingly, those questions are still there.
Of course
People
they are in
still
communities,
ask you,
yeah,
you know, those
they do ask
questions.
you.
You know, people will ask me, "How old are your
Yeah.
daughters?" And
Yeah.
are they not thinking of getting
It's always
married?
the main
and it is the main topic. And there is a point where you just say, "No, they're not." You
Yeah.
know, and like Gita says, I'm of the same view. You know,
Yeah.
they will find their partners when the time is right.
Yeah.
And actually, marriage is you know, it's not for everybody. It's not going to work for everybody.
And like we were hard cookies. We made our marriages work.
I think you
we
had
had
to.
ups and downs, and we
Yes.
compromised a lot. Not just us, our husbands as well. They compromised a lot. But can you see the younger generation now? Then no one's willing to compromise.
they don't.
No one, you know, they quit very quickly.
Yeah.
And we
Well, I just think they think life's too short. Why are we going to put up
Why
with this?
are we? Yeah.
I do believe that, and I don't
Yeah.
think that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily think it's a good thing. It depends on you know. But what I do think is that, like Harjinder said, is that those questions still prop up in
they
the
still do,
communities,
they do.
and that's
they do.
shocking. You
And
know,
they will do.
You know, and that's what really shocks me. You know, is that you know if someone is on their own and they're of an age. It's are you not looking? Oh, have they not found
Or
anyone?
there's something going on.
Or there's something going
Yeah,
on.
yeah, that's a
They're
quick-
definitely with someone.
Yeah.
You know, and it's almost the questions are, and that hasn't
actually-
changed
and
in our
also,
culture at all.
You know, it's quite sad because you then get the question. Well, you know, the questions are thrown at, which make it sound like, well, what did you do?
What did you do? Yes.
You know,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
went wrong somewhere.
Yeah,
Obviously,
yeah, obviously.
Our own mother.
Yeah.
You know, their own nanny will say to you know, well, you know, what did you know?
Yeah.
You've gone wrong.
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah. What's
and
happening?
then you start to question. Well, actually, did I go wrong as
Yes.
a parent? And what didn't I do that I should have done? That should have
Yeah.
made them by now settle. But actually, no, that's not
Yeah.
the case at all. But that then gets thrown. Actually, you never
Yeah.
said to them, did you?
Yeah.
Or did you never
No.
tell them that's what they
No.
should have done? Or, you know, all of those questions.
And then
I'm
then the girls say, well, when we were at school, you said no talking to boys. When you dropped me off at university, Avni, she says, Mum, you said you're here to study now, not to get,
You were
know,
still teaching
you-
them that,
you know,
what you'd been told.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, and then
Yeah.
Avni's, now I'm working. Where am I supposed to?
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
difficult.
it's because nowadays kids meet in universities, in schools, like
Yeah.
Ricky and Monica met at university.
Yeah.
So it is really.
Yeah.
I think we were.
yeah, in
we
our
were
own way.
strict,
Yeah, we were
and
strict. And
We
maybe-
Well,
were
you
a
were
bit
doing
tough
what
on our
you-
girls.
You were doing what our parents had
Yeah.
done. So you were parenting the way they had
Yeah.
parented, because
Yeah.
that's all you knew. And that itself was very difficult, because now you're realising actually, well, no, it shouldn't have been that. We should have
Yeah.
actually changed slightly. And what's so interesting, and again, going back to the attitudes in our community, even immediate family around us will comment, they still have this whole thing about even the caste system and the religion.
Well,
and
I think people
that gets questioned,
and also I think people look at us and say it's because you're so modern. You've become so modern. It's not about becoming modern. Modern's got nothing to do with this. People look at us and think, well, you've given your children all the freedom and you've become modern.
What did you expect?
And you've not taught them that actually that's got nothing to do with it. And none of that's got anything to do with it, because it's not about being modern. It's not about, actually, it's what the children want. And actually, children, when they get to a certain age, they are adults.
Yeah, they are adults.
You can influence your children, and you can also influence adults. But there's a point when those adults have grown up where they are going to make those decisions.
They're going to make their own minds
And actually,
up.
they have to make those decisions, and they have to take those steps. And sometimes they will fall, and sometimes they'll have to pick themselves up.
And they're good children.
And
they're not doing anything wrong. Only because they're not getting married. They've got,
or they've moved out and they've done the things which are probably not the norm,
which are unconventional for that generation who are still around. Generations of our mother and mother-in-law.
Because ultimately, a girl should leave home when she's getting married.
Gets married,
and so therefore that's the expectation.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not anymore.
No.
And you can't.
And we should be proud. That we've got independent.
And this is what Raj says a lot. He says, we wanted them to be able to stand up on their own 2 feet. We wanted them to be able to go to university, get a good education, then get good jobs, and then actually we wanted them to come back home and reform to the way that is expected. So then we want to pull them back, but it's too late. You can't pull them back then, because you've given them this foundation where they've now grown up to become independent women, and actually that's what we want. Don't we?
Absolutely. No, I totally agree with you.
Them to be reliant on someone providing for them, that those days are gone. They are able to stand up and provide for themselves. And so when they need a partner, they're looking for different things in a partner. They're not financially looking for security. Our girls definitely I don't think are. They're looking for someone that's going to share life with them
with the same interest
and so it's very different.
So it's moved on, but we do still hear those things among our community, especially with the older generation still hanging around. They still, I remember we had a wedding recently, and it was a case of did she meet him herself? Yes, she did. So it wasn't arranged. No, it was a love marriage. Oh, okay. What caste? These are the questions that's still getting asked, and this is where, unfortunately, even though we have moved a lot, people are moving, it's still quite slow in some families and some communities.
We take a step forward, but then all of a sudden you hear something and you think, gosh, we've gone back to where we were 20, 30 years ago.
Well, I think people just like to drag you down. That is it. That is.
I agree with you. I think people do like. I don't know what it is. I think it's an Indian thing. I don't know what it is, but when somebody is doing well or something's happened, nobody can be happy for them. There's a case of, there's always there's got to be something going on.
They go for the negatives.
Something's happened. It's always the negative.
We're very judgmental. And that somehow unfortunately instilled in many individuals because that was what we saw as growing up.
Growing up, our parents did it for a reason. I think there was a lot of things involved, including reputation and people
because
were
they were holding on to a culture.
And people were harsh in those days. If something did go wrong in a family, that family was sort of sidelined, weren't they? Whereas nowadays, it doesn't matter because it's going on in most households.
That's it. It doesn't matter whatsoever. Because what's happening, it's like you said, every household story.
And I do believe in a marriage, if someone's unhappy, they should come out.
Regardless.
I think regardless of, they can give it a go, and there's only so much you can give it a go. But if it doesn't work, then actually, and especially, for your own, your own mind, and also if there are children involved, it's not a healthy, it's not a healthy environment to be in. So if it's not the right thing for people, and I think, that's the important thing. But we still have the stigma of that.
Of course we do.
If someone then decides actually, and we know, surprisingly, and we can talk about it now, but we know people of our age doing it now, and then you're hearing comments, oh my God, now they've decided
After 3 kids.
after 3 kids and after 30 years of marriage.
Yeah.
Well, actually, yes, they have.
Yeah.
You drift apart.
And they drift apart. They might have drifted apart years ago, but because of society and the pressures, but now people are thinking, well, actually, no.
But Harjinder, that's really interesting you brought that up, because we're seeing it among circles of people we know who also went through arranged marriages. And when you speak to them, they'll say, well, actually, you know what, I didn't want to marry him anyway. I stuck with it because that my parents, you know, and we had to make it work. We had the children, and then our lives, we were compensating through our children, and now we realise actually we don't want it.
And actually, the children have got
Gone
you know,
home,
and
gone
you'll
off and done their own
you'll
thing.
hear the comments. Well, their children are grown up and getting married, and now what they've divorced, and you're like, yes, because actually maybe for them now it's the only time that they can, you know, and it's so. I do think we need to.
And when there's children involved, it's difficult.
It is very difficult.
When they're of a younger, I think when they're younger adults, though, it's, you know, but when they're little, yes, you can understand.
And people have. We know many people within our own, you know, our own friendship groups, they have stuck together because of children. But actually, you can see that they've drifted away, you know. But there are reasons people do it. There are lots of reasons. But, you know.
I think it's also because this is going back to when marriages were arranged. I mean, compatibility, I often laugh about myself. So I love water sports. I love swimming. I love being by the sea. I love do all of that. Now, when my parents were looking for a boy for me, surely they should have asked, what, you know, I mean, Iqbal can't swim. The water touches his ankles and he freaks out. So, you know, the compatibility, you know, so if we're going to talk about, so I think that's what it stems down to. A lot of these couples are realising, actually,
we've got nothing
in common. There's no compatibility.
And sometimes you can develop common. You can. Because we know, I mean, Raj is very similar to Iqbal, but actually slowly I've got him to come out and go on walks and be a bit more adventurous and travel a bit more, so you can develop but you're right, sometimes that's not going to happen.
No, that's right.
You know,
so I think that's what it stems down to, is that those questions never got asked by our parents, and they sure didn't give us an opportunity to ask those questions. So
because if you don't have that compatibility and you've not had any interest, the only interest probably were the children.
The children. I look at Ricky and Monica, and then I sort of sometimes compare my marriage.
Because
and I think, wow, it's
so different.
37 years, you know, apart. It's so different nowadays, the way kids, you know, work.
And their marriages are, how their marriages are.
It's completely different.
And I'm sure if you ask them, it's not easy, is it?
Of course it's
not. You know, I'm sure.
Look, every marriage is going to have its ups and downs.
It does.
No one has that perfect marriage.
And as we grew up, we always thought there were certain couples in our own family that had this perfect relationship. And as we've got older, we won't go into too much into the details, but we realise, actually, now, God, that wasn't perfect.
No, of course.
So, you know, I don't think there is such a thing.
I think it's regardless whether or not it's arranged or love. I mean, we know of some cases where couples have been dating for years. They have this lavish wedding. They spend so much money on it. I mean, the prime example, gosh, it was many years ago. Who was it? There was a really well-known businessman in Southall, and his son got married to someone very, very well off. They had a very lavish wedding, and within months of that wedding, they were divorced.
And you hear those,
you know, and you know, and you think you'd got to know someone, you'd been going out with them for years. It's a so-called love marriage, and then it's you know, and I think that's, again, the younger generation maybe not taking the concept of marriage serious enough.
Because let's look at it. I mean, there are two very different styles of weddings now. Those that are wanting very small weddings and may go abroad and do them, but then you've got the massive,
lavish
10-day events and crazy money being spent on these big weddings. So it you know, it's what people want. But you're right. Because ultimately, are we forgetting what is
marriage?
And I do think I think you've got to be mature. You know, I was worried about Ricky, 28. I thought he was still not mature enough. I thought, oh my God, you know, he's still young to get married. And I would have probably waited till 30, 31. But you know, it happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got married at 18, and I don't think I was.
No, I don't
I was
think
too young.
anyone's. I think
when I
that's
look back at
very
it now, and I think I was.
But we
so
did grow
young.
up very quickly.
Like
in our
Roman says,
household,
what
I
does she
suppose.
say? We grew up with our.
Yeah, so we've.
Yeah.
She says it now, but I think even at that
Yeah.
time, while we were at mum and dad's, we did grow up quick. But our children have said you've actually grown up with us.
Yeah.
You know, you've had your children, and
Yeah.
actually your children have grown, and you've grown, which is
Yeah.
probably
Yeah,
very,
yeah.
very right.
It's true.
It's
I mean,
probably
I
true.
thought I was too young at 23,
Yeah.
and I had a few
Yeah.
years on you guys, so I could not imagine having been in your shoes.
Yeah.
You know,
No.
it's
It's
yeah,
interesting because now looking back at it, you think, God, yeah. I mean, you know what we remember of it. You
Yeah.
think,
Yeah,
Had
yeah.
a baby
and-
at 21.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think.
You know, we went and lived in a house that was unfamiliar to us with a
Yeah.
family that, even though we
Yeah.
knew Raj's parents, they
Yeah.
were still, you know,
Yeah,
it was an
yeah,
unfamiliar setting.
Everybody has
But
their
actually,
own.
we adapted so
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah.
You know, I think within months, it becomes the norm again.
yeah. And I think it was going on all around us.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think our stories are unique
No.
to just us.
I-
I think that's what was
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
done thing
yeah.
back then in the 80s and 90s,
And it was
70s,
it was
80s
the
and
norm.
90s.
And-
yeah.
But I think for us, and I
Yeah.
think, you know, I do want to sort of acknowledge, I think we were very lucky. We had two very,
yeah,
you know, Raj's mum and dad.
Yeah.
You couldn't have asked for
No.
better.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Raj's dad not here, but mum, you know, and I think that is
Yeah.
the key to us. You know, unfortunately, in our generation or our era, successful marriages were also the family.
Yeah.
of course
So
it
you
is.
And
just don't
if
marry the boy, you're marrying
you
the
weren't
family.
marrying the boy
You're
at the
marrying the
time.
family.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I lived with Raj's
Yeah.
mum and dad for 10 years,
Yeah.
then
Yes.
we lived across the road
Yeah.
from them. But actually, the relationship I have with his mum
Yeah.
is much stronger than the relationship with my
Yeah.
own mother
Yeah.
at
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think, you know, she has helped us through our
Yeah,
marriage.
definitely.
You know, and probably helped us because she's always taken my side.
Yeah,
you know,
she's
so
great.
you know, I think those were key people.
Yeah,
Those, you know,
that's
they were
right.
key people in your marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they made sure that
Yeah.
you know, they understood you,
Yeah.
and when the time was for them to intervene, they would intervene.
Yeah.
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 You had
And
that support.
You had that
from
support.
Yeah, yeah,
your husband's
definitely.
side of the family
Yeah.
and your own
Yeah.
side
Yeah,
of that.
yeah.
And I
it's
think-
very important.
When you haven't got that,
Yeah.
that was probably very difficult.
But I don't
for
think kids today understand that because
No,
they
no.
all want to get married and not live with anybody. They
Yeah.
just, you know, and I know, look, I get it, all the privacy thing, and I get the whole growing up and having your own place. And if, again, I lived with mum and dad, mother and father-in-law for 7 years, and I don't have any complaints. I don't regret it. We got to have some lovely holidays. We saved up some money. We managed to buy our own place. And they had, you know, I had my daughter there, and she got to know her grandparents. So I don't have any regrets in that way. But I think kids today, again, they just don't understand that concept.
No, they don't.
Which I don't blame them because it is quite strange to get married and then move in with
Yeah.
another family. But on the same thing, you know, the same side of things, it's, again, they don't see the benefits of
Yeah,
it.
there's huge
There's-
benefits.
yeah.
We
Benefits.
know there's
Yeah,
huge
yeah,
benefits.
yeah.
You know, just financial benefits,
Yeah.
firstly.
Yeah,
But also, you know, if, you know, everybody gets on and you're all quite, you know, you're willing to listen to each other, then actually it's not a bad setup.
Look at Ricky
Yeah.
and Monica, prime example.
Yes, yeah.
So
So
we
go on,
have-
tell her. Yeah, please
Yeah.
tell the story.
So Ricky and Monica, we decided at the beginning that they wouldn't stay with us, as you
Yes.
know. So they moved out. 6 months
I think it was less, wasn't it?
was
Just slightly
and then
less.
they were homesick. Ricky was homesick.
Do you mean Ricky was homesick?
He was a bit of a mummy's boy. Monica, coming from a family, she wanted to live in a family. They were both quite
Yeah,
lonely.
they were both.
And one day they just says, "Can we move back home?" And you know, we said, "Are you 100% sure?"
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, they moved back home, and it's fine.
Yeah.
It's
And that's
brilliant.
quite unusual,
You
isn't
know,
it?
Very
she's a
unusual.
lovely girl. You know, and it's worked out really well. But
Yeah.
they needed. I think they needed more people around them. They needed a
That's
family.
quite sweet, though.
Yeah, that was
I mean,
sweet, yeah.
It is, but on the same hand, we know Ricky is a mummy's boy. As a lot of Asian boys are, and I'm.
But actually, I
You
think
know,
also Monica came
Monica
from
comes
a,
from
Monica
a
came from
She
a
came from a
family.
family where she lived with
Yes.
she lived in an
Grandparents,
extended
yeah,
family.
extended
So I
family.
think for
With
her
her
it was
grandparents,
nothing,
yeah.
you know, it was not unusual. So I think they definitely were homesick.
We thought we were doing the right thing, but
Giving
you know,
them this
and
space,
then I was
yeah.
a bit worried. You know, how's it? But no, it's worked.
Yeah.
touch wood, working
And
really
how
well.
do you, because there's, again, in our culture, there's this thing, and I was having this chat, and the girls will laugh if they watch this. I was having this chat with some girls at work,
Yeah.
and we were just talking about mother-in-laws, and I said, we were having this chat, and I said, what is it with Indian girls and their mother-in-laws? Why is this have to dislike our mother-in-law?
Yeah.
Why is
Yeah.
it? Because I absolutely adore my mother-in-law.
exactly.
I have a fantastic relationship with her. I could have her move in with me tomorrow. I talk to her more than I do my own mum. Why is it there is this stigma attached to we have to dislike our mother-in-law? There has to be this. I mean, you're a mother-in-law, Gita. I don't think Monica dislikes you. I mean, she always
I
says
hope
nice. She's always saying nice things about you.
You don't interfere. You let them get on.
You
And
just leave
if you
them to it.
feel you need to, you've got to say it at the right time.
Pick your
and it's the
moment.
way, and the way you say it.
Yeah.
And then with Monica, I wouldn't treat her any differently to Avni.
Yeah.
So she is our daughter.
But do you feel you can? I personally feel your mum's your mum, and that's it. I don't think anyone could fill your mum's
Yeah, but I don't think
shoes.
that's. I think that's
Yeah.
where we've probably got it right, because I don't think Gita wants to be her mum.
No.
Yeah,
I don't
her
think
mum
you-
is
her
her
mum
mum.
is her
Yeah,
mum.
that's right.
But she can share a lot of things with me that she probably can't share with her mum,
Yeah.
because her mum's quite far away as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm probably the
Yeah.
nearest call. But we, you just you can't always take your, like, if they have an argument or something, you don't get involved.
Yes.
If you do have to get involved, you don't just always say your son is right.
Yeah.
You've got to look at it. And if Monica is
Objectively,
wrong,
you
I
have
do
to look
say
at
to
it, yeah.
Monica, darling, you were wrong here. And if Ricky is wrong, I will say it
Yeah.
to Ricky, where Ricky is usually more in the wrong
Yeah.
than Monica. But you just let them get on with it. You don't
Yeah.
ask them where they're going, what time they're coming. They tell you.
Yeah.
And you
If
just,
they want to.
yeah,
If
if
they
they
don't,
want to
they
tell, if they
don't,
don't,
yeah.
you can't pull a face every time they're going out. You let them. They make their own meals. They cook
Yeah.
what they want. If they want a takeaway, you
Yeah.
let them get a takeaway. You can't do where they have to put everything through you.
Yeah.
And it's hard, because I think in the olden days we used to have to be.
People-
where are
you
you
were
going?
dictated, you were dictated to.
That's it.
Yeah.
But it's completely different.
Yeah.
You've got to move on. She's probably more like my friend than my daughter-in-law.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah.
And
But I don't think you dictate.
I don't
That's the main thing. I think
dictate, no.
the older generation, where we've heard
no.
the stories where
Yeah.
daughter-in-laws, mother-in-laws, is because the mother-in-law has had wanted to dictate.
Yeah.
And I think that's where problems arise and
And I do
issues
think
happen.
too many women in one house.
Yeah,
and, that can
absolutely.
cause,
Yeah.
and a mum,
Yeah.
that it's their home. So
Yeah.
actually,
and
sometimes
the way
Yeah.
I see it, Ricky and Monica happy, I'm happy.
Yeah.
That's all I ask for, because
Yeah.
the last thing I want to do is see them unhappy.
Yeah.
And they're happy, and that makes me happy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
as long as they're happy, it's
the
not
main
about
thing.
me.
Yes.
It's about them.
Yeah.
And they're happy living with us, and they haven't got a problem.
Yeah.
That is fine.
Yeah.
If they decide in a couple of years, no, we want our space, go ahead.
Yeah.
That isn't a issue. You buy your own house, and move out. But you just gotta relax.
Yeah.
You have to be relaxed and understand. That is their house as well.
Yeah, and you can't dictate to them. You
Yeah.
can't be. Yeah, and I think you've got a really good balance there,
Yeah.
Gita. I
Yeah.
think that it's a good way.
It's worked. I think it works, and I think you're quite
they've
relaxed
come
about
back
Yeah,
home and
yeah.
And I think you are quite relaxed.
And I'm lucky, I think, because I've got, she's a really good girl.
Yeah.
Because it could take the wrong girl.
Yeah.
To come in who,
Yeah. Yeah.
make my life hell.
Yeah.
Where I, if I'm going on holiday or anything, I don't need to worry, because I know
Yeah.
Monica is there and
Yeah.
she looks
It is
after
given.
the house.
I think you all have to compromise. And
It's
you're
give
right,
and
if
take.
you'd found someone that wasn't willing to
Yeah.
compromise,
Yeah.
then that proves to be difficult.
Yeah.
But I think if you can still make it work.
Of course
Yeah.
you can.
But everybody has to compromise with each
Yeah.
other, and you have to be willing to listen.
It's
It's
give
like
and
she
take.
goes to Brad for a week. It's like me and Ricky, we're upset.
Yeah.
We really, the house, we are really, it's like,
Yes.
oh my God, there's someone missing.
Yeah.
Because her presence in the house, it is,
Yeah.
and
important to you all,
it's
yeah.
important. and we love her to bits. And I think that is a really, I mean, I've been very, very lucky.
Yeah,
I have
which
to
is
say,
good.
I have been very lucky with Ricky and Monica.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, she
Which
is a really good girl.
Yeah. And I think it's really important, isn't it, that people recognise that, you know, and people see it, you know, and I think those things are changing and children are wanting to stay. I mean,
we're
at
hearing
home,
a lot
we're
more.
hearing a lot more.
And like I
of
said,
it.
there could be their own reasons, financial,
Yeah,
but
everything,
also
yeah.
actually, you know, as children, as they have children and, you know, just having the
lack of space, you know, anything, you know.
Financial reasons.
Yeah.
And I think our generation are the ones whose kids are now getting married.
Yeah.
And our thought process is very different because what we've experienced.
Yeah.
So our experiences have changed us and we know now the rights and wrongs of it. And also we haven't got those pressures our parents had of still hanging on to those traditions. We haven't got that link back to, you know, answering to family in India or answering to you know, olders here.
I don't think
you know?
we feel we need to answer to anybody. I think, and I don't think you should.
You don't need to justify.
You don't need to justify yourself. You don't need to justify your
absolutely.
actions. And I think as long as, you know, you do what's right, then there isn't a need. But, you know, I do think children now, marriage is very different to, and it means different things to different individuals.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, it does mean different things to individuals.
If you could see the future in 10 years' time for us, and at the present moment, I know things are very tough and strange for us in this country in terms of unsettlement, unrest, and who knows where we're been.
Go back to where we came. Well, where did we come from? I mean, that's the other, you know,
ultimately. If we
ultimately.
were to say in 10 years' time, where do we see our children in terms of their, you know, I think less and less of our, there are still parts of our community, they're still quite traditional, they are doing the traditional thing, getting married, having children, settling down and all that. But, you know, I look at it and I sometimes am quite shocked at what I see and what I hear, and it's very different to what we were used to. I don't know how the landscape's going to look in 10 years for it. It's very different.
I think marriage, firstly, people aren't having children.
Yeah.
You know, people don't want children. You know, you can tell, you know. Marriage, I don't think, live-in relationships now, a lot of, you know, kids live in I think marriage will fade away slowly.
Arjinda, would you be, I mean, your girls have taken a big step, and they've bought a place, they've 2 sisters, they've moved out. How would you feel one of them meets somebody, I mean, and they want to, you know, their partner to move in?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to accept it.
You have to, don't you?
You're going to have to. Ultimately, you know, they bought a place together because they haven't found anybody, but they wanted to buy and they wanted to move and I think, you know, and get on that property ladder, and I think good luck to them. But yeah, you're right, in a year's time, if one of them says, actually, you know, I found someone, but, you know, and the girls have spoken about it quite openly, that they're not sure they would go straight into marriage. And it's not uncommon. We know lots of people that have had live-in relationships and are now married. And ultimately, you know, they're gonna make that decision. I'm not gonna make that decision for them. Am I gonna go against that decision? I don't think I have an option there.
No.
I don't think I can go against a decision that a 31-year-old's going to make. I think that's very difficult to say. We're going to be against that and we're not going to approve it. My own views and they're my views and my perceptions, and I'll keep them to my, you know, whether it's, but ultimately I can see you, because you can go straight into a marriage if you haven't lived with someone, and end up then having to live with them and realise, actually, we're not compatible now. So dating someone, yes, I get that. You could be dating for 5 years.
But living is different.
But as soon as you live with someone, things can become very differently. So, you know, if that's an option that children want to explore, then I think we have to be open to, you have to allow them.
We have to move with that, don't we?
We have to move with it. You don't have a choice with, you know, and I think, knowing our girls, I think they will do what they feel.
And I think how we feel about it personally is very personal to us because of our upbringing. I mean, I have a daughter and she's an only child, and I constantly, and you know this, constantly worry about her being on her own. And ultimately, yes, of course, I'd like her to meet someone and be happy and settle. And actually, I do believe in marriage. So ultimately, I'd like her to get married. What sort of wedding she has, that's totally up to her, whatever. But ultimately, that is my belief, and that's where I am with it. But I know for a fact that she will want something different because she is, you know, a younger generation. Their thought process is different.
It's different.
She will want to get to know somebody and live with somebody. that I can't stop that, you know, and I will have my, you know, thinking on that and my thought process on that. But ultimately, yes, we can have these wishes for them because we have been conformed to think like that as well. Whether or not we agree with it or not, that's, you know.
Yeah.
But
It's just that if your children aren't married, I don't know, do people look... They look at us. Do they look down at us? Her kids aren't married. Is there something wrong? Stories get made up in the community.
Yeah, I think there is still that element. I do think there is that stigma there.
Yeah,
I do think there is a stigma still there where the community, where if your children are, it's almost like they look at you to feel sorry for you.
Yeah.
And I find that really, and I've spoken to people who have, you know, older children, you know, in circle of friends and, you know, it's that stigma. They look at you and they'll say, how old? Oh, really? You know, or, you know, and they look at you like that.
They feel sorry
for you, you know, and that stigma is still there.
Yeah.
I do think in certain circles,
I think it'll be there for another few years,
there,
but it will disappear.
I think the next generation, I mean, come on, we've heard it ourselves among the older generation.
I think the older generation.
Definitely.
I don't know.
I think there is a certain in certain circles where they're quite backwards.
Yeah.
You know, we're quite
backwards.
when they're backwards. You know, they're backwards in their backward thinking.
Yeah.
You know, they do still have those.
Is it backward thinking, or is that just their views?
I think it is
but we say, and I think that word again is also outdated, backwards. I think it's people's views. I think people will have views that actually, no, I don't think it's the right thing. I don't think someone should live with each other. I don't think, and my view is, yes, children should be married, or girls especially.
Girl married at this age, boy married at this age.
I think that's their views. I don't think that's, and our views are very different. And as I said, some people will say, your views are very different because you're very liberal. And we are liberal. We've become very liberal.
Well, we have become
and let's
that,
ask why we've become liberal. We lived a life that was very non-liberal.
Definitely.
Okay? And we had this conversation with Mum the other day where you made us do certain things. You made us live a certain way. You made us, and we did it. But we did not do that to our children. We did not
went complete opposite.
We went the complete opposite. Yes. Now, that could be, we've gone the complete opposite, and actually the result of that is our children are very free to do what they want.
We gave them all the freedom.
And we gave them all the freedom.
We didn't have.
But you have to remember why we did that.
We
I
did
agree
that with you.
Because we didn't have it. And we always wanted to give our children what we didn't have. Okay? Now, sometimes that could be not necessarily the right thing. But we were very young and we didn't know. So actually, you know, we did. You know, Mum said to me, you know, I recall when Rumney was going off to Liverpool to study, she needs to stay at home. She doesn't. She doesn't need to stay at home. Why does she need to stay at home?
Why doesn't she go to uni?
She needs to go to a London
uni.
London uni. And actually both my girls went to unis, you know, Leeds and Liverpool, and they didn't stay at home. But again, why should she? Well, see, that's why you didn't, you know. So there is always an element of, well, actually you didn't do that and you should have done it this way, and that's why they've resulted in the way they're very.
But you were both very young mums. I was older, and I still did it like that. You know, simplest things like even what Isha wears. You know, we were restricted on what we could wear.
Exactly,
so I've never restricted my daughter. Never. She can wear whatever she likes. I really could. I don't care. You know, it really doesn't bother me. Clothing doesn't. That issue's never ever bothered me. You know, and I think that's because we were always told, or I was always told, you can't wear that.
And I suppose that's the same when it came to the marriage conversations with our children. I didn't have those conversations. I didn't instill it in them from the age of, oh my God, you're going to get married and that's the norm. We didn't.
No,
I'm afraid we didn't.
Did you with Avni at all?
And
she was the eldest.
And she was the eldest. No, I was more focused on her education.
I think we were, because we didn't have an you know, we had an education, but we left school at 16.
I was more focused
so we were more
independent.
We were more focused on getting them to go to university
and be.
So actually, we didn't talk about marriage. I didn't say to Romney, you know, I'm expecting that by 26 or 25 that you find a partner, you get married, and then you have
if not, we'll find you a partner.
I always did say I'd like Avni to be settled. I used to say 30, 31 Avni. I think I'd like to see you settled. You know, but you know,
Yeah.
when you met the right person.
Yeah.
You know, it
And those conversations
Yeah.
now, obviously, they do take place. But,
Yeah.
you know, maybe,
Yeah.
you know, there's an element of, you know, we
do ask, have you met anybody?
Yeah,
Anybody on the
yeah,
scene?
yeah,
You know, and
yeah.
their answer is, when it's
No, I think
serious,
their answer
we will
is when
tell
it's
you.
serious, we'll
We'll
tell you,
let
because
you know.
otherwise you'll already start to
Yeah,
pre-plan
yeah,
the
you
wedding
know,
when it's not even, you know.
But like I said, you know, you hear
But you
so
have
many.
you I don't have it at the moment, thank God, but you do have pressures of your own mother still asking you all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
And now she said that
So-
the girls have moved out. I can wish that goodbye now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
she's already said it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
They're moving out. They're going to start. And I'm like, well, if that's the case, that's the case.
She doesn't get it, does she?
She doesn't get it.
Yeah,
and,
she's
and
a different
actually,
generation.
there's nothing stopping them from still finding
finding-
someone
Yeah,
and
of
getting
course.
married and
Yeah.
settling down.
Yeah.
I do think I'm quite optimistic that my girls have always said that actually, should they want to go and start a family, have children, then for them marriage is important.
Yeah,
and I think that's the
absolutely.
thing to remember.
That's
I think
right, yeah.
you know, if children do, and I think they still see that as a commitment, that actually if they find the right person and they want to start a family and they want to have children,
They will
then they
be.
still feel that marriage still needs to
Yeah,
and
they
we've had
still
those
need that
conversations.
security
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
that.
and
Yeah.
that's
Values are
they-
still there.
and the values
Yeah,
are there,
yeah.
that they still feel that marriage then would play a core part in the
Yeah.
but then they both talked about whether they want to have children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the main thing, though, Gita, is the values are still there. Even though we've
Yeah, yeah.
changed, we've
I think
evolved,
we've still
Yeah,
instilled those.
we've still
yeah.
got those values.
Yeah.
You don't have to be the way our parents were
Yeah,
to install
to-
some values
Yeah.
and keep those traditions, or
Yeah.
some traditions. You know, there are some traditions we're quite happy to let go of. You know, arranged marriages maybe being potentially one of those. Well, arranged marriages in the way ours were arranged, where, you know, as we
Yeah.
described them. So we're quite happy to let go of those. But I think that's the key point, is that the values are still there, those morals are still there, you know, the upbringing
Yeah.
of
and the
those.
importance of
Yeah,
marriage, and
yeah.
I think they know that if children, you know, if they wanted to have children, then the marriage is
Yeah,
important.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
an important
definitely.
part that plays.
It's a really interesting conversation. I think we do carry on these conversations on our Friday nights
Yeah,
and with
we
our
do.
We do.
kids as well.
Yeah.
And I think,
Yeah.
you know, we all now can look back on it, and like I said, we can share it, we can talk
Yeah,
about
I mean,
it,
if
can
we
laugh
add
about
the
it.
amount of years that we all have in our marriages,
Yeah.
35, 37, 20,
28.
28, Narinda, I think, is
25?
Yeah. No,
No,
she's
she's
more.
old. Yeah,
She's
30.
30 this year.
And
30.
Ranjit has
10.
15.
No, about 15, 16.
So, you know, when you look at that,
yeah.
overall, we've got, you know,
Yeah.
over 100 and odd years
Yeah,
of
yeah.
marriage between us all, that,
Yeah.
you know, it
Yeah,
worked.
yeah.
We're still
It worked.
going.
It worked.
I think our parents, like I said, at the time we may not have seen it, but they obviously did think, look, you know what,
Yeah.
we are doing the best
Yeah.
by our girls. We're
and
doing
it's
the,
not,
you know.
and like you've said, there's been challenges all the way,
Yeah,
but, you
yeah.
know, ultimately...
We had the support system there.
Yes, and that I think
Yeah.
that's the big thing. And we did have support system. We had support system from both our
Both
families, and they were very
Bringing up our
supportive.
kids, helping every
and we had
time,
the
yeah.
support of our in-laws. So
Yeah.
you know, we were very lucky.
Yeah.
And I
the
think
support system.
towards the later part, like now, we have each other.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
And I think that makes a massive difference, doesn't it?
And we are very lucky with our
Yeah.
partners. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
You know, our partners have integrated
They're
well
all
with
right.
us.
Yeah.
You know, with us as a family. You know, the boys have, and same with our you know, our
Yeah.
you know, sister-in-laws.
Yeah.
That we have
We
have
are
been very
we're
lucky.
quite an overwhelming family, aren't we?
and we can be overwhelming.
Yeah, we
but,
can be.
You know, when you have a look at people that have had to come in the family, they've also they've also
definitely.
you know, integrated
They
with us.
they
so
integrate more into our family
Yeah.
than we do, because let's face it, the families we have married into, none of them are as big as our
No,
family.
absolutely not.
No.
So
You know,
they have taken our
They've
family.
taken our
Yeah,
families on.
Absolutely,
And,
yeah.
and, you know, and
it's a good thing.
It's
It
a
works.
good thing. It works. So
Thank you so much, guys. This has
Okay.
been real fun. It's been great today. It's been fantastic having you guys back on. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. For those of you who are listening and watching, thank you for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed today. I hope it's a topic that you can relate to, or even starts up some discussions in your own homes and among your friends. It may not be one that today's generation is going to even understand or relate to, but I think it's one that has been quite important for previous generations, and it's one that still possibly still gets spoken about, and there is still some debate about it, and how the concept of all the different types of, you know, arranged marriages, love, how it's all changed and how it's evolved. And I think our generation has played a part in it, and we are ready to recognise that things have changed. But I hope it opens up discussions and chats, and I look forward to seeing you on my next podcast. Thank you.